Well, good afternoon, or if you watch us online, whatever time it may be there in the future. My name is Eric Schmidt. I'm a product manager here at Google in the cloud platform team. This is the Google Talks, or Talks at Google series. Today, it's a pleasure to welcome the VP from Subpop Records, Miss Megan Jasper. Mrs. Megan Jasper, or is it Miss?
It's so weird. I never use any of those. I guess it's Ms. or Mrs.
Okay.
But you can call me anything you want.
We'll
I've
call you
probably
Megan.
been called way worse
Yeah.
than anything you can dream of.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. In full disclosure, you and I talked about this. So I also DJ at KXP 90.3 down the street. So whenever I was asked to do this, I was like, "Wow, this is amazing! I get to talk to you and get to play in the music space while we nerd out at Google." So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Sure. So I think most of the folks in the room, maybe, but potentially not online, may not understand really what Subpop is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a record label, and it's here in Seattle. But what is Subpop Records?
So Subpop Records is a record label based in Seattle, and we have been around for officially almost 28 years. But we are an independent label, which is also kind of a funny term to throw around because we're 49% owned by Warner Music. But what we do is we focus on developing artists, and we work with bands that sometimes a small handful of people know about, and we hope that we are able to develop their careers and to a point where they can really make a living as an artist. That's always our goal, so long as that's what the artist's goal is as well. But that's what we do, is we've worked with bands who have become as popular as Nirvana or Flight of the Conchords, some comedians like David Cross, the Shins, the Postal Service, and we work with a lot of artists that still very few people know about, but that are important enough in our eyes that we can't imagine not trying to expose their art to the world.
One of the things I personally love about Subpop is that, especially from a communication perspective, you're always very consistent about what you believe in, what you don't believe in. To the extent on the site, there's no like definitive mission statement about like this is Subpop's mission. But the one thing that you do say is that at the end of the day, the label's about serving artists.
Yeah.
And as most consumers, and there are some producers of music here, can you shed some light on what specifically serving artists means? Like what happens on a daily basis? What do you do to nurture them and help them?
Yeah, and I have to say I love that you brought up the fact that we don't have a mission, because that's something that we've talked about for so many years, because we are a mission-driven organization, but a mission-driven one without a mission, or a declared mission. And there are times when I say to Jonathan, who owns Subpop, like, I think we need a mission statement. And he'll be like, yeah, it would probably go something like, meow, 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 with developing artists and community and while having fun and maybe a little extra meow, meow, meow. And then we don't have a declared mission statement because we're just like, yeah, that sounds good, go back to work. So we say, when we talk in meetings, we say, our goal is to serve the artists with whom we work. And what that means is the development of those careers. And what that means in daily practice is, first off, really getting to know those artists, which it's funny, like I think the first place a lot of people's minds would go is what it means marketing-wise and what it means sales-wise. And although those are very important things, I think the most important thing is knowing the people that you're working with, because you can't serve them if you don't know who they are. If you don't know who they are as people and as artists. So for us, what that means is, what are your goals? How do you want to present yourself? How do you want to make your art and then express it afterwards? Do you want to go on tours? Does that stress you out too much? Do you have family and you need to prioritize your kids? How is that going to work? Because if we understand those things and what makes those people come to life or what makes them shut down, then we can understand what situations to put them in or to spare them from being thrown into. And so that's a huge part of it, is just knowing who they are. And from there, making sure they're able to make a record that they feel proud of, making sure that they have a record that they feel like they can stand behind and go out and tour on. And we then do marketing around all of those things. And then hope that their record sells, or that the streaming is at a volume that can bring in money for them. And ultimately that they can have the careers that they want to have.
It's interesting, as I was listening to all those things, not until the very end did you really start to talk about money. And maybe if you could explain a bit, we'll talk a little bit about Hardly Art, the other label of the label in a bit, but can you explain kind of how in today's terms how Sub Pop does make money?
Yeah, we make money in a lot of different ways, and for an industry that has been screaming the sky is falling for so many years now, we still make the majority of our money off of record sales. And what sales, the word sales now means how many still, even though the number is declining, how many CDs does a band sell? We don't make CDs for every band, but if we don't make CDs for, say, Beach House, we're losing sales. So how many CDs are selling, how much vinyl is selling, it's a lot. And what are we able to get still in downloads and streams? That's what sales means. We also are able to we get licensing opportunities for our artists. And what that means is we look into opportunities with music supervisors who are placing music for ads, TV, film, whatever opportunities exist out there that their songs may be a good match for. And if the artist is okay with those opportunities, then we attempt to secure them. We also do a fair amount of merch. We make t-shirts and hoodies and all sorts of stuff that you might not need, but people buy them. And we're able to give some of that money to the artists, which is great. And we look for international opportunities as well. We're doing all of the same things that we do in the US in other countries with partners. So it almost sounds old-fashioned.
No, I was waiting for you. I don't know if you've seen the movie Spaceballs, where Mel Brooks was always going, merchandising. Do you remember that? Yeah. So if you could hold this up, this may be a flashback for you. But this, an engineer on the team that I work with, Bill Neubauer, he sent me a mail this morning and said, I just dug this up from my basement. And I asked him whenever he got it, and he believed it was 1991. And if you look at the tag...
It looks like it's 1991.
Yeah, if you look at the tag, I mean, it even feels 1991, right? It's heavy, like that's whenever t-shirts are made out of real ingredients. And,
yeah.
And it was black at the time, right? So can you explain the origin of the word loser?
Yeah, I sure can.
Because this is a mystery, right? Even on the internet, with all the information that we have in Google's great search engine, like still it's kind of confusing as to why a loser is on that shirt.
Yeah, I can also tell you that this t-shirt was printed by a guy named Jeff Ross, who was doing our early shirts back in the day. And I know that because I recognized the tag. And I'm old, so I remember this shit. So loser was a term that Sub Pop started using in 1988. And here's what I love about loser is, the people who started Sub Pop and worked at Sub Pop and not just Sub Pop, but the people who were music geeks and old punk rockers at that time were usually total misfits in the day. And that's kind of where loser comes from, is that feeling of just not fitting in and then you find a community or a group of people or something that you feel like you belong to. And then you kind of feel like a winner, right? So when Bruce and John were, Bruce Pavitt and Jonathan Poneman, who were Subpop's co-founders, when they started doing the Singles Club, which was a release of limited 7-inch singles that would go out to people, you would say, yes, I would love to sign up and I'll get one limited colored vinyl single every single month for 1 year. And then you send your $60 in. Sub Pop gets money really quickly, which was very helpful at the time. And you can get these singles and then sell them for a ton of money afterwards. That's what a lot of people did. But they used the word loser in their campaign. They said, hey, loser, come join our singles club. And we had a lot of losers signing up. And then they were like, God, this is great. Let's make loser t-shirts. And I remember the first time I saw a loser t-shirt, it was spring 1989, and Tad was playing at a really small club in Manhattan. And I had not yet moved to Seattle, but I was just about to. And he was wearing the white version of this t-shirt. And I remember looking at it and going, God, that's so good. Because loser, it resonates.
Yeah, it has this kind of a dual mode, right? Like inwardly, as people look at it, they have some like emotional maybe sympathy for you, like this person is broadcasting the loser. But then as soon as you attack them, then this idea of like I'm banded with the rest of the losers, and there's power, right?
And it makes you feel proud. And so there are people who go to the airport store. We have a store at SeaTac Airport, and we sell the loser shirt. And there are folks who go in there and they're like, why loser? Why loser? But, I mean, hello. We're fucking losers.
I'm going to get back to your effing loser issue in a minute. But I want to, specifically yours, I want to talk a little bit about loserdom. So right now, Subpop is offering a set of scholarships for $15,000 to help eligible high school seniors achieve, as you call it, their focused education as a path to loserdom.
Yes.
And I read this. I was, I'm an artist and I'm also a nerd, but I felt a little like passively discriminated. Like, is this the only path that I can choose to get to loserdom? Is to basically focus on music, or are there other paths? Like, are there other elements to this? So.
For that scholarship, it can be any kind of art.
Oh, okay.
So it can be visual art. It can be dance. We had one person get the scholarship who made fanzines. It's more creative endeavors.
Excellent. I feel less discriminated, I guess. All right. So whenever I was prepping for the interview, I reached out to my friends at the station, Cheryl Waters, Kevin Cole, John Richards, and I said, hey, I'm having a challenge trying to find interesting things other than what's kind of coming up on regular search on Google. And I said, please help me. Like, I need dirt.
I'm so psyched.
Their unanimous reply, and I concatenated them. So for anonymity reasons, we'll see if you can guess who they are. Their unanimous reply was, "I hope FCC violations aren't an issue for you. She swears like a sailor with Tourette's and can't be fazed by anything. I can't think of a more fun interview. She's a riot. There's nothing you can say that will shock Megan Jasper."
I guess that's John Richards.
Yeah, it's a combination of John and Cheryl,
Okay.
But I won't. Yeah, so that was it. They wouldn't give me. They just smiled and they were like, "Good luck." So
they've all heard some really terrible, nasty stuff fly out of this.
Face to face, they told me some, but none of it was documented. So for email purposes, we're good. So quick, favorite coffee shop in Seattle?
C&P in West Seattle.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Lighthouse Beans, delicious. Close second, Real Fine, also in West Seattle, just opened up. Their coffee is fucking killer.
Yeah, and the C&P is family owned, which is great.
Cam and Pete.
Cam and Pete. Beer, wine, or both, or none?
I like wine.
Wine, red?
Yes, I also love a Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay, and so following up, why do you hate to cook? What's up with that?
It's so stressful, and I just can't fucking handle it. So you guys know, you work all day, right? And you're tired, and okay, so you can go for a walk, or you can cook in a kitchen after having been indoors all day long. That sounds terrible to me. Plus, I don't trust, I like playing with colors, but I don't understand how to translate that to flavors. And so anything I'm gonna make is gonna be kind of a bummer. I like baking, can't handle cooking, I'd rather have hemorrhoids. I don't want to be stressed out when I'm at home. Thankfully, my way better half and more presentable half, Brian, he's a really good cook.
So the first search result in Google is, quote, foul-mouthed and community-minded Subpop Records executive Megan Jasper. What would your mom think about this if she was here and got to see this? That's like the first search result.
She'd say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Excellent. In the 90s, you're a member of a band, Dickless, right? So you weren't a founding member, but you joined as a vocalist.
True.
By the way, if you Google Dickless Megan Jasper, it's okay to look at the results, all right? And the images.
And by the way, vocalist is a very generous word.
I'm just reading what Wikipedia and the other things said. So, my question is, if Sub Pop's business depended upon it today, would you sign them?
Oh, hell no. No. I mean, if Kelly Canary were still in the band, absolutely yes.
Okay.
If I was in the band, hell's no.
You don't think
I would be fired. It should be.
You don't think the serving artist power of Sub Pop could save the band at that point?
No.
Okay.
I mean, let's just say my talents are not in the spotlight.
Okay.
Kelly Canary is a different story, though.
I was listening to some of the tracks, and some of it was amazing, others not so much. But
It's shocking.
That's
you
why
can
there's
still
so much
hear.
music. Yeah. So let's talk about some other artists that you did sign to get an inside view. First one, Father John Misty. Is he really as dreamy and as mysterious in person as his music leads you to believe who he is?
That's a good question. He is.
And by the way, I have full disclosure. I have a man crush on him, so that's why I picked him.
As you
so,
should.
Yeah.
Did I just goof this thing up? Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. He is one of the most talented artists we've ever worked with. And in person, you get all of the elements that he shows on stage, but way less exaggerated. He is so razor sharp smart, it's crazy. He sweats over every word, but there's no delay in him picking a word. And he is a funny motherfucker, man. He is hilarious.
So he's like a funny Paul Simon with a beard and not as irritating. So.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right.
He dances less in person, too, when you're just hanging out.
Awesome. Fleet Foxes.
Yes.
So explosive growth. I mean, I remember whenever they hit the station the first time, and then everyone was addicted to them, right?
Yeah.
And then things change. Forget it was the lead singer. I can't remember.
Robin.
Decided to go to back to college. What's next? Do you have any insider information? Are they starting to circle the castle again? And
yes.
Yeah.
Robin is writing new material. I am hoping, as a fan, that he is getting ready to perform again. He took a lot of time off. He also is such a gifted human being in that he's a really talented musician, and he's a really bright, interesting, dynamic person who has the capacity to do an awful lot.
Yeah.
I hope he starts playing shows again. I know he's writing stuff.
I literally, the hairs on the back of my neck is standing up knowing that this is happening.
I know.
So
The
thanks.
world needs more music by him.
Wow. Mudhoney, one of the kind of founding four, if you will. We'll talk about the founding four. at the beginning of the label. What's the key to their longevity? So I'm good friends with their sound guy, and we share stories here and there. But I mean, they seem to be on tour all the time, and they look the same, and they sound the same. Like, how do they do it? Like,
Well, fillers. They get grunge fillers.
okay.
They tour a lot, but they don't tour a ton because Guy is a nurse, and he is an ER nurse at Harborview, so they have to be really careful with their schedule. I think they all have kids except for Mark, who works at Subpop. He manages our warehouse.
The warehouse, yeah.
I think that even though they, we all grow up and we're all getting older, but I think they've just held on to, I think they love playing together still. I think they've held on to a lot of the beliefs that they've always had, and I think they have fun touring and just being around each other, and that they are family, that band, and they write a great song and they perform. Have you guys seen Mudhoney play ever? If you have, you know that is something so special. And seeing Mark transform from actually a very presentable, normal guy to the thing he is on stage is like unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But he is a great front person. And they're just kind of magic.
I see that the concept of family and stability a lot. Eddie Vedder, Dave Matthews, et cetera, as they're bouncing around the city, family is very important to them. Connection to record labels, other bands, venues, et cetera. So that seems like one of those keys for people out there. It's like it's just not about chasing. You still got to settle down and nurture your roots. So your desk at work, you can see it online. How much drugs are filled in that desk? And is it just like we see on vinyl? Like, do you just have every drug as possible that's needed to do your job?
Have mounds of cocaine. You just never know when you're gonna just feel sleepy. And I have just shitloads of dope and everything you can imagine, rolled up bills. My desk compared to that show is like the Mickey Mouse Club. I usually have a cup of coffee. I am so the boring version of what that show is. But I will say that my desk is way sloppier than anyone's on that show. I like it when the house is clean, but I apparently don't like it when my office is clean because I do everything to screw that up, and I have piles of shit everywhere, but I know where my stuff is. I can't keep it organized to save my life.
To each his own, but
It's bad.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that your desk isn't just filling over with drugs.
With drugs. No, that's what the parking lot's for outside. That's pretty bad too. My dog almost stepped on a syringe the other day, and he picked up, we have those little drug bags on the sidewalk all the time, and he picked one up in his mouth. I was like, oh my God, pickles, no. Ready to throw him into rehab.
He's like a drug runner. So,
Totally.
We'll talk about drugs and some dysfunction in Seattle in a little bit. I want to talk about another, something that's completely different. And I want to thank you for swinging by on the flippity flop to do this today. If you haven't read this story back in 1992, Megan pulled off probably one of the best, let's say, editorial spoofs at the time, especially for a paper like the New York Times, where she was asked to basically kind of explain grunge and somehow, I mean, you can fill in the story because you did the interview, but you made up a lexicon, a language of grunge speak, and the New York Times published it, and it was completely made up. Right?
Yes.
It was all bullshit. So,
it was all bullshit.
Yeah, and you used words like on the flippity flop, cobnobbler, which actually is now like a real word. Like people use cobnobbler.
As they should.
Yeah, wax slacks. So I have two questions. One, what were you thinking? And number two, would you attempt to do that again? Like, now that Subpop is it's not small. Seattle's not small.
Oh.
You're repping tons of artists. You were the receptionist, now you're the VP. Would you do it again?
I would do it in a heartbeat. Are you kidding me? That's what life is all about. My coworker Derek, on my way out today, said, all right, do you think I can get away with this and promise I won't be fired? Or just tell me right now and I won't do it. I'm like, what is it? I want to make a t-shirt. It's going to say trigger and then an arrow pointed down to my crotch. I'm like, of course you have to do that. Like, yeah, that's like so rated G. Are you kidding me? Do it. I feel like, life is way more fun when you can laugh at stuff and when you have shit to laugh at. So as long as it's not mean and it's not hurting people, I am so all for it. That happened because I was so buzzed out on way too many French presses that I had in my apartment at the time. And when that phone call came my way, I just remember feeling like, yes, like it was, I can either chat with this person and come up with some crazy ass answers, or I could go back to work. So I was like,
if you haven't read it, you got to read it. It's awesome. And then who came to the New York Times defense? I forget the
Tom Marin.
Yeah.
No, Marin was the journalist who wrote it. Tom Frank. Tom Frank worked at the Baffler and was a University of Chicago PhD student, I think, at the time. And he ended up exposing the story. And I didn't know any of that stuff was going on, but I remember him calling me and saying, oh my God, the New York Times, they feel like such pussies right now. And meow, meow, meow was like, awesome, this sounds fun.
I would have loved to have seen if we had Twitter and real-time search and everything else that we have now, just how differently, because this took days to play out. Yeah.
But I have to say, my favorite thing about all of that was that the day it came out in the New York Times, I did a huge piece on Seattle and Seattle culture and how to understand the music and how people talk. It's like, why would they talk any differently than anyone else? But my mom, who got the New York Times, she lives in Worcester, Massachusetts, she calls me up and she goes, Jesus Christ, you're never gonna believe it. Go out, run to the 7-Eleven, get the goddamn paper right now. Go get the Times. All your bullshit's in it. And I was like, awesome. And she was like, good girl, keep doing the good stuff. And I'm like, lying? And so when you get praise from a parent for telling lies, it's like, oh my God, yes, the world is right.
So most of the stories that I read, third party and also the interviews that you've done, the majority, even today, you're so positive. You're almost like a duck, like nothing, just nothing sticks. It just washes off your back. You keep going. I want to take you back to a time which is coming up calendar-wise. April 5th marks the anniversary of Kurt Cobain's death, and in 1994 they had moved on. They were on DGC at the time. But nonetheless, you had traveled through many, many journeys with them. And can you take us back to that day? And what did you feel? What was going on at Subpop? You kind of know what was going on in the city, but can you explain your reaction to that?
Yeah. So for me, at that time I was working for ADA, which was Subpop's Subpop is distributed still by ADA in the States, and I hadn't heard anything that morning, and I weirdly every 4 or 6 weeks I would have an appointment at Fred Meyer's, the department store. What is it called? The one-stop shopping store, whatever the hell it's called, and I would sell music to them. And it was always a little bit more stressful than my other accounts because the buyer was a bit older than me, had way more experience than I did. I was like the little kid going in there at the time. And so I always felt like I had to have my shit together and I had to be able to tell him straight up why he needed to buy certain records. I had to have everything together in my head. And so that morning, I just remember driving to their main offices, and I didn't have the radio on. I didn't have anything on because I was just trying to, kind of make sure I had my shit together. And when I walked in there, the buyer, Don Jensen, said, what's happening with Kurt Cobain right now? And then he told me that a body had been found in the garage to the house. And I remember kind of feeling shocked, but I thought, because I knew that Kurt was in rehab, that I thought maybe it was my friend Dylan who was in Earth. And I just remember like trying to hold it together and just kind of get my work done. The thing that I remember the most was I walked out with an order of more Nirvana records, more any records than I had ever walked out with before, and I felt so conflicted because not knowing if it was Kurt or not Kurt, I just was like, oh my God, this is fucked up. Like, somebody has died, and this is what my job is right now, is to put in an order for a whole lot of records at Fred Meyer. And so I remember driving home, and weirdly, there was an anniversary party that Subpop was having, and so everybody from ADA was flying into Seattle. And so I had to do airport runs after that and pick people up. And I remember people saying, because here's the thing, it's like whenever anything happens, we as humans often end up just projecting our own stuff onto it. And so there was a lot of that, like, what's there to be depressed about? He had a ton of money, or, it's just, I just remember hearing a whole lot of stuff like that and just shutting up and not saying anything. But I remember being terribly concerned, mostly for Jonathan, who was in the Subpop offices, and I knew there were news people outside of those offices, and it just was bad. And I remember just, at the time you don't know what anything means. We gain perspective by having a beginning and an end to things, and then moving beyond it and having the ability to process that whatever lies in the middle of those things. And so I just remember not knowing what any of it meant, but I remember seeing a lot of the people that I know and love in states of shock, and it was just a pretty awful day.
Yeah, you can, as time moves on, doing memorializing folks, whenever David Bowie passed, like we were able to memorialize him, the next day on the radio, and so as time moves on, your perspective changes. Like, those feelings are still there, but we can now reflect on other things. Like, I was doing some research, and you published the original contract, signed in 1989 with Nirvana, which was very open source of you guys, so that's great. You published the contract online, and the first advance was a whopping $600 to be recouped through recoupable expenses through future royalties. So my question is, how did Subpop overcome recouping $600 on Nirvana? I don't. That seems insurmountable. So.
Well, they're still not recouped. It's so weird that first record was made for $600, but it was, and it's a perfect record. And if there's anything to take from that, it is that artists can do an incredible amount. I'm not saying that they always have to have very little, but what I'm saying is it's mind-blowing what an artist can do with very little. And that record's an example of that. And I have to say also, just kind of going back to Kurt just for a second, is, you know, that stuff, I don't know that that it will ever really be reconciled, but I have to say, I think there's something so important about just remembering that there are so many people in our world who are just larger than life. And at the end of it all, I mean, really everyone is just the same, with struggles and gifts and joys and challenges. And Kurt was so no different. For most of the time that I knew him, I always had the feeling that he would rather kind of sit back and just watch and enjoy than be the center of attention. And I think no matter how much money anybody has or how much success anybody has, or not, it's so important to remember that we're kind of all in this thing together, and to be mindful of that, and to never think that you know what anyone in the world is going through, because we don't.
I was thinking that it's kind of that theme is kind of pervasive throughout the artists that you have repped over the years, both the happy ones and maybe the ones that had a lot of loser inside of them, right? They're all very genuine. So I remember hearing that album for the first time, and I was just like, wow, like I'm angry too, and this person's angry, and this is amazing. Like,
yeah, it feels good.
Yeah, it feels good. Yeah. So I want to switch gears a bit. I want to talk about the role of women in the workplace, specifically in executive roles.
Mm-hmm.
You started out as the receptionist, kind of worked through how many years now? 24, 5-ish?
Yeah,
right?
I started in '89. Yeah.
Yeah. But you work in a highly male-dominated field, and I would say, because I've been in this space for a long time, it's not even so male-dominated. It's also kind of sleazy at times, right? The record business is a tough business to be in, and meaning there's not a lot of rules, you know, that are enforced. How did you survive? And then what advice would you give to women who aspire to kind of stay the course and move through, say, like a rank and file position to an executive position?
I would say that I survived a lot of it because I tried not to give a shit. And I, for much of my time, I didn't give a shit. Meaning that I was way less mindful of the fact that I'm a woman. I also felt like I was just doing what I love to do, and I felt pretty lost in that. And I have had the good fortune to work for a guy, Jonathan, who's pretty enlightened and pretty great, and has never made me feel any less. I mean, God knows I am less in a million different ways, but not because I'm a woman. And so I've never felt like that. I also feel like I've had the good fortune of helping to shape some of the culture at the company. And we have a pretty equal number of men and women in the company. And if anyone showed signs of being an asshole to anyone because of who they are or what they look like or what their deal is, there's just no room for that in our office. So I was maybe sheltered from it a bit. And I would say that, you know, the biggest challenge I think that women have, because women are obviously every bit as capable as men, but the biggest challenge I think is women having families. Because to be able to work in a place where you can step away and have a baby, and then be able to take care of that baby in a way that a mom needs to, whatever that means for any mom, it's different than a guy. I think there are wonderful things that men bring to a child and that women bring to a child. But women have such a greater challenge of continuing with their careers when they have families. And I know a lot of women in music and in other jobs who have had to switch gears in order to provide for their kids. So I would say if you are a woman and you're in that position, just do everything in your power to stick with it if that's really what you love to do. And also, I think you can't feel badly for prioritizing your kid over your friggin' job, because you kind of, and that's what I would do if I had kids. Fuck, I have 2 dogs, and like, you know, it's, I'm sure there are people in my life who have been afraid that I might start breastfeeding them because I have a completely dysfunctional relationship with them. So, and if I could have kids, I'd probably be a puppy mill. So, meaning if they came out looking like furry puppies, I'd be like, why not have more? Because I love a dog. But I think that it's just challenging for women, and I feel like it's all of our responsibilities to make sure that we are mindful and sensitive to especially women in the workplace, and especially women who are having families, because that's ultimately what it's all about. I mean, we have to die off for a few more generations in order for things to be a whole lot better. So we kind of need some kids in the world.
I love the family reinforcement again, so I want to go home and give my little guy a hug after listening to that. There's nothing in my question that the question flow that talks about how you jump from breastfeeding puppies to the next question. So I want to talk about Seattle. The analogy I was using is, Subpop was the womb, if you will, of kind of birthing the original 4, and then kind of nurturing the city, in terms of growing music culture. And this place is completely different in many ways from the late 80s and early 90s. It's one of the fastest growing cities. We're competing back and forth between Austin, which we are way cooler than Austin. No offense to Austin, but I was there a couple weeks ago, and Seattle's way cooler.
I agree.
Good. You agree. All right. But there's a ton of change happening in the city. People are honking their horns. They're driving too fast. People aren't saying no worries anymore. It's like, who are these people? It's like this confluence of people that aren't Seattleites. And then you have impacts of things like, restrictions on live music venues. Folks like here in Fremont, Nectar is under a lot of pressure. Yeah. Because there's too much tolerance for noise, because we want higher density housing. Decline in artistry because it's just too damn expensive. Mm-hmm. Like, it's really expensive, especially where your offices are up on Capitol Hill, et cetera. And then you also have the cultural aspects of how people consume music. Snacking one at a time, spending 99 cents, listening to a stream that they don't pay for. How has this impacted? How has this impacted Subpop in terms of how it feels about Seattle, and where do you think it's headed?
So it's such the question right now.
And I realized that was like 3 questions in one.
That's
so,
okay.
Yeah.
So as far as, it's so funny because I was thinking about this exact thing this morning, because I'm one of the commissioners on the city's, Tom Mara is too. Seattle has 21 music commissioners who do outreach programs and talk to people and find out what the challenges are, and try ultimately to put together work plans that make music a greater experience for people in the city. And when you have exactly those challenges, which is the biggest one being Seattle is very expensive to live in. So how can an artist who's struggling to have a career live here and not go to Portland or LA, which is happening constantly right now? I don't know exactly what the solution will end up being, but I do know that it's something that we're having, at least everyone's having it, but we're having that conversation and trying to pull in our local politicians to help find answers to those things. And I spoke to the folks at Nectar just last week about what they're going through, and it is interesting because that's not a super high density neighborhood, but the complaints are actually coming from Queen Anne. And what it sounded like to me is that sound is traveling in such a way, probably with the wind at times, where it's hitting a small number of people on Queen Anne, where they're hearing like sentences during someone's sound check even, which is bizarre. But it's, I don't know what the solution is, but what I do know is that I think this city is a pretty great city with some big challenges for sure that need to be figured out. I hate driving to work every day. Do you drive in from West Seattle every day? It sucks. And you have to figure out how to make the commute bearable. It's tough, but the city is a great city. And I believe that there are solutions to every problem so long as you want to find the solutions. And it's our job for sure at Subpop and for sure at other music organizations in the city to help find the answers to those questions. And I don't know what they are right now, but I will tell you that I feel really determined to help figure that out, and it needs to get figured out.
One of the things that I personally been doing and my friends have been doing is reinforcing to our friends, and as we meet new people, is to go and see live music.
Yeah.
And also buy the music. So going out and seeing and supporting, people are doing that less. And as that dies off, then the venues start to die off. And I was thinking about, back in the late 80s and early 90s, that was one of the amazing things about Seattle. Mm-hmm. Like you could roll in and see Nirvana or Soundgarden, Tad, etc.
Yeah.
Live on stage. And yeah, it was really loud, and probably people in Queen Anne were pissed off, but that's what created the culture and pulled through the culture. So so go see live music and buy the records. You started a new label concept in 2007 called Hardly Art, where you were splitting profit versus taking points on royalties. Some of my favorite artists, Sea Pony, Taco Cat, Chastity Belt.
Yeah.
How's this business doing?
It's doing really, really well. So we spent many years kind of figuring it out and trying to understand how it would work as a company. It's 9 years old now, and it's doing super well. And we were talking about one of the bands earlier at lunch, which is Gazebos. They're one of my favorites right now. But the thing that's interesting that's happening at Hardly Art, and it was not a conscious thing, but there are so many female artists. It kind of goes back to the other stuff we were talking about. Chastity Belt, Laluz, Gazebos, Taco Cat, and more. There's really good stuff coming out that I don't know that I can talk about yet, but it's super exciting, and it's very female driven right now, and the women who are in those bands are they are extraordinary human beings. And they're making great music. So I have to say it makes me crazy happy right now. The company's doing well.
Yeah, maybe there's something more attractive or logical for a female to say, I'd rather have equitable distribution versus cutting some more aggressive point deal. So I would only speculate. I have a bunch of other questions, but I want to open it up to the audience so that you can ask questions if you have them.
How's it going?
Hello.
I actually spent a little time when I was little in Worcester. How do you say Worcester?
Did you? Well, I think
Worcester?
you're supposed
Worcester.
to say Worcester,
Yeah.
but
My dad-
we all say Worcester.
I was like 3. My dad called it Ustern. And so when I looked for it later in life, I was like, Ustern. This place doesn't exist. So my question is I write songs, and but I have a day job and I have a family, so I'm not gonna tour for the next 10 years and hit the road. So years ago, I used Taxi for placing a song in a little spot on a TV thing. Is that still viable? Should I just focus on YouTube videos? Like, what's the thing that someone who's not trying to be in a band and tour, but rather just write songs, what's a good avenue for that these days?
That's an interesting question. I think that probably it's a matter of finding good publishing, because if you can write music and send it to some publishing companies, a really great publishing company will be able to work with you and then maybe even engage another artist in performing those songs. And I think if you can find a setup like that, that seems like the thing to do. But I would also say that if that's not possible or achievable right now for whatever reason, I would just keep posting shit and making it available, because, and I don't mean shit like, shit, but what I mean is, I think when you put your stuff out there, people will access it, and that's the most important thing, is just getting it up and out.
I wanted to get your take on what the role of record labels might be a generation or two from now. So my first real introduction to them was from a movie. It was a Ray Charles biopic, and I watched the movie, and it seemed so beautiful, and it took me back to a time that may or may not have existed in reality, but it made for a beautiful impression of what the equation between an artist and a record label might be like, and it was a really close, tight bond.
Yeah.
I don't know how things are today or how things might be in future, but could you add some context to that?
Yes, I love that question, because I think what you were connecting with there, that bond and the understanding of who someone is as far as their art goes, is if you can put that into a mission statement, that's what every label's mission statement should be. Because what that is understanding who an artist is and understanding how to get their music out into the world in a way that works for them and connects people that music connects with people who will be moved by that music. So ultimately, that is what a record label will always be, because you're not a label without doing the A&R. You're not a label without finding the artists. It's probably the most important thing, because then you have something to market, you have something to sell, you have something to stream, however it is that people consume music. You don't do anything without the music. So all of that other stuff is the stuff that changes, and how you sell music, how you listen to music, how you first hear a song, like that stuff is always going to change. But finding the artist that you can work with and work really well with, that is what a label should always be. And then how it goes out into the world, that can evolve.
Hi, are there any misconceptions about the music industry, and what might some of the biggest ones be?
That show Vinyl is probably really good at spotlighting it. So are there a lot of drugs? Sometimes. Is everyone breaking rules and doing shit they shouldn't be doing? Sometimes, but not to that degree. I would say the biggest misconception is that it's just fun, like rock and roll times all the time, and that's not really the case. So, for example, if I know I'm going to have a long day and I have meetings with artists and their managers most of the day, and I really care about how those meetings are going to go, the last thing I'm going to do is go out drinking until 2 a.m. the night before, because I can't. I mean, I have to pull it together and do right by, the company I work for and the artist. So it's not like, it's just not Partyville constantly. I mean, it would be nice if there was a little more Partyville sometimes, but I feel like I beat myself up over that stuff. Like, I kind of want to be on, and I want to bring my best to whatever it is, and my coworkers feel the same way. I mean, maybe they're a little bit, I hope they're a little bit looser than I am about it, but I think that's the biggest misconception. And maybe even going back to like the whole female thing, I think, like the role of the woman who was the A&R person in that first episode, like, it was so bogus to me because, I guess in our world, and not just Subpop, but like-minded labels, there are a lot of women in positions of power, and they're not just sandwich girls or, it's a funny portrayal. But I'd say those are the biggest ones. It's not party time all the time. It's usually like fucking suck it up and work well time, and then maybe you can have a glass of wine afterwards.
I was excited to hear you talk about the singles club, because I remember that when I was a kid, and just this idea that like I'm committing to buy everything that Subpop puts out, for the year before, like sight unseen, before I've even heard it. And you talked about kind of what the role of labels are, and that it's about discovery, and developing artists. And as you were talking about it, I was kind of thinking back, like, yeah, that's exactly what the Singles Club kind of was. Mm-hmm. It was like that in a record store. It was kind of where I would go to find stuff. And I think about the shift that's happened since then, like lots of record stores have closed and everything, and there's like, and social is now a big part of how people find things. Yeah. And I just was curious to hear your thoughts on how Subpop has, weathered that shift, I guess, where it's like, how are people finding things? All the work that you guys are doing to develop artists, like, how is that like being understood by people?
Well, I think it sort of, I think we are lucky that we've been a company for as long as we have been, because like you said, you would buy a record without even knowing what the music sounded like. I think at some point, Matador Records, Merge Records, whatever it is, it becomes an endorsement. And so I think we are lucky in that a lot of people will come to our website and wonder what we're putting out or what's next. And I think that's something that we're able to offer an artist that's unique because we've been around long enough. We still try in all the same ways to get the bands out there as much as we're able, but ultimately, I think what it comes down to is being able to serve as an endorsement in the same way that Pitchfork does. You'll go to Pitchfork and wonder what is best new music or best new track, and I think labels serve that same purpose, sort of, in acting as a filter. Like, there's so much stuff out there, but here's a means to filter that stuff, and then maybe I can, hear something that I wouldn't have heard otherwise.
Thank you, Megan. We're out of time now, but thank you so much for coming and speaking with us.
Thank you for tolerating me and having me.